The first species that we will discuss today is the apple snail. Apple snails are an interesting species. I actually kept them myself until 15 years ago, and I didn't even notice that they were banned from the aquarium trade in Europe until I noticed that none of the fish stores in my area sells them anymore. And this is the case all over Europe. They were banned throughout Europe because in the late 1990s, early 2000s, they escaped a aquarium facility in Spain, and then they escaped to the Ebro region, to the Ebro Delta. The Ebro is a huge lake in Spain, which is where they attacked local agriculture actually, because they can live and reproduce in rice fields extremely efficiently and very, very quickly and outcompete all the local snail species because they do one thing very differently compared to other snails. Many snails are hermaphroditic. It means they can reproduce themselves without needing a mate, like another male or female snail. Apple snails don't do that, but they have another trick. They actually lay their eggs during the night outside of the water. So they climb up, and if you have them in an aquarium, they will climb to the top of your aquarium and lay egg clutches there. And the egg clutches are actually pink and look quite disturbing and alien, in my opinion. This is a way for them to save them from aquatic predators. So fish cannot eat them because they don't reach them, and they are protected by fish and other aquatic predators like crayfish, for instance. This way, they can reproduce extremely fast and outcompete other snail species and then actually destroy all kinds of aquatic agricultural production, such as rice mainly. A single female can lay egg clutches that have around 500 eggs in it and can then populate a whole rice paddy or a whole rice field within a super short amount of time. The event that actually triggered the ban of apple snails in Europe was when they escaped aquarium facilities and then were released into rice paddies in the Ebro Delta in Spain, and this was a vital part of their industry, of their agricultural industry, and it actually destroyed the rice plants. Then it was officially banned in November 2012, and now it's not allowed to purchase apple snails in the European aquarium trade anymore. Except I read on the internet, and I'm not sure if this is 100% true, you can apparently buy them again in the UK since 2024. I guess no one is really growing rice in the UK, no clue about that. But in 2024, this was apparently taken back, this ban in the UK. The next species that we have on our list is an internet favorite, I would say. It's the axolotl, which is an animal that originally comes from Mexico, I think Mexico City even, and only from one lake that I'm not able to pronounce. It's called Lake Xochimilco, I think. They have become a massive global pet trend in the 1990s, 2000s, and early 2000s, basically. They are kept by hobbyists, and they buy them when they are still small and cute, and they grow extremely fast and always stay in this aquatic larval stage, so to say. So you always see their gills, and they look very alien to us, I would say, because they don't look like a normal salamander, but they are highly adapted to this aquatic stage of life. What the danger is of having axolotls in local waterways around the world is that they outcompete and starve native salamanders. So there's salamanders in all rather warm regions around the world. Even here in Germany, where it's rather temperate, we have also native salamanders where the axolotl can survive. So in warmer regions that are similar to Mexico, they have shown to outcompete the local salamander and amphibian populations. That's why they were banned in many states, not in all states, but in many states. They are, for instance, illegal to own in Australia, in several Canadian provinces, and in the USA. They are forbidden in California, Maine, and New Jersey, for instance, because their escape would lead to local salamander populations to die or to be outcompeted. And the primary driver of their ban was not that they were dangerous for agricultural production, not at all. They actually eat other animals mostly. They, for invasive species prevention, because they, first of all, outcompete those other salamander species and those other amphibians. And second of all, it's a measure of disease control, I would say. So the wildlife agencies found that they introduce a fungus that is not lethal to them, but lethal to other salamanders all around the world. And that's what makes it even easier for those axolotls to populate other ponds, slowly moving rivers and waters, which can actually lead to a rapid decline in amphibian populations if not controlled for. The next species is actually an animal I've kept myself in my teenage years. It's the marbled crayfish. And the marble crayfish is an interesting specimen. It was actually found in German aquariums, so it somehow through random mutations was created in the aquariums in the 20th century, so in the late 1990s, 1980s, somewhere around that time. And this random mutation led the marbled crayfish to be able to clone itself. So one crayfish, they are all female and can fertilize themselves, basically mate with themselves, which is a bit strange. And one female is enough to populate a whole aquarium. And if that happens and you are the aquarist that keeps those crayfish, you run out of space very, very quickly. And you cannot really deal with it by separating the crayfish into different tanks. And that's why aquarists came up with the amazing idea to just release those marbled crayfish into the German waters and also other waters throughout the world and throughout Europe after that. And that's what led to other crayfish species and other crayfish populations to be outcompeted by those crayfish. And that way, they were discarded by individual aquarists, often in Europe, but also in Japan and other countries, and then quickly outcompeted and killed the local crayfish populations. They are basically omnivores. They eat basically everything. They eat the local vegetation. They eat smaller fish, fry. They eat tadpoles. They eat all kinds of animals, which leads to them being a real threat to local ecosystems. That's why the marble crayfish is these days banned across the EU. In the UK also, it's banned in Japan and in multiple US states such as Michigan and Ohio. And for good reason. These animals are crazy when they get introduced to new waters. They can just, one of them is enough to eradicate the whole population of local crayfish in local waterways all around the world. The next one is the northern snakehead, Channa argus, which is originally from East Asia, so from China, Russia, and Korea. It's interesting because it's similar to the axolotl. They are bought in a rather small form when they are still juveniles, these snakeheads, and then they grow relatively quickly. And careless aquarists often then don't have space anymore in their aquariums or just want to get rid of them. And instead of killing them or bringing them back to the fish store, for instance, they release them into the local waters. And these fish, they quickly became apex predators in these waters and outcompeted other fish and ate other fish fry and became a super invasive species in those waters. They established themselves as apex predators in North America, for instance, and wiped out whole fish populations locally. They are dangerous because they can actually breathe air and physically crawl across land between ponds and puddles and rivers when it's wet enough. This makes them way more effective at colonizing different water systems and small ponds and rivers than other fish because they can just cross those land bridges between the waters. The live import of these fish has been federally banned in the US, so for the whole US and Canada, because they are considered so invasive and so dangerous for local fish populations. The fifth species is actually not a fish, it's a plant, it's a water hyacinth. I hope I pronounced it correctly. This is a plant that is originally from the Amazon basin, so from the Amazon River in South America, and was originally imported because it has beautiful flowers. That's why it's called water hyacinth, and is a really nice addition for koi ponds and for ponds all over the world. Because it has really, really beautiful greens, and these flowers, they are also beautiful. However, they grow at an alarming rate. So I keep a closely related plant to that Amazon frogbit in my tank. I can maybe quickly show it. So this is the Amazon frogbit that I keep in my tank. We'll put it away again. And it's closely related to those water hyacinths. However, the water hyacinths have one problem. They grow at extremely alarming rates and cannot be controlled anymore by local ecosystems because they're just not used to those plants and there's no animal that really eats them. So they form these green mats across rivers and standing waters and are a huge problem for other plants that grow in these rivers because they don't let light through. Therefore, the whole ecosystem is disrupted by these plants. And by doing that, there's actually no more dissolved oxygen in the water, which leads to lower oxygen levels in the water and also no oxygen exchange between the water and the air above. And therefore, this leads to the fish that need high levels of oxygen in these rivers and waters to suffocate and die because they cannot breathe with their lungs, basically. Therefore, the water hyacinth was banned in the EU, in the UK, and in Australia, but also in New Zealand, Japan, and in the southern US, such as, for instance, Florida and Texas, which I found quite interesting that it was banned in so many countries despite just being a seemingly beautiful looking plant. Then we have the red-eared slider, which is a turtle that has its origin in the southern United States and northern Mexico. This one is actually invasive all around the world. We have them here in Germany in almost all local waterways, in small ponds, in almost everywhere, because they were originally introduced to zoos and then escaped. But they are also present in many, many other countries. They were originally exported as cheap and young baby turtles, so to say, and they were bought by aquarists and kept in aquariums. And then same story as for the axolotl and for the snakehead. They grew bigger and bigger and bigger and ate. And at one point, they didn't fit the aquarium anymore or the pond which they were in. And then the aquarists just released them to the local waters. And this is always the same story. And it's so bad for the local ecosystems because they cannot cope with those red-eared slider turtles. They can adapt effortlessly to global climates because they come from the US-Mexico border. This is a climate that is very similar to other countries that they were banned from. They are just hardier than the local turtle species that they outcompete easily. They are even known to aggressively bully native turtle species. Usually aquatic turtles have these logs where they chill on and have to use actually to rest. They cannot really do that at the water's surface because this is where they would be susceptible to predators like birds and stuff. If they chill on a log, they can just jump into the water, and this is also what they do more or less. Those red-eared slider turtles, they bullied away our local turtles from those logs, and by that basically led to them dying because of stress, like literally moving them away from their local ecosystems. They also, of course, outcompeted them for food resources because they compete for the same resources, and they also spread salmonella, which led to local turtles to be infected and die. That's why they were banned from trade in the EU, in Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan, actually, because they had these effects on all of these ecosystems. Now we have also the walking catfish, which originally comes from Southeast Asia. They actually, in this case, they were kept by aquarists or aquaculture facilities rather, and home aquariums in Florida, and they actually escaped during floods. So this time it was not really the aquarists' fault because they tried to get rid of them. At least that's how I read it on the internet. They then escaped into the Florida ecosystem and use specialized primitive lungs to breathe air. And they have like stiff pectoral fins and those lungs, and they help them to also go from one pond to the other pond, which again helps them spread through ecosystems extremely fast. This is what they can do during when there's rainstorms or when there are floods, because then the space between the ponds is wet, and then they can just travel from one pond to the other. They therefore intentionally migrated to native wetlands and commercial fish farms, and then they just ate the local water, the local aquaculture stocks, which is kind of ironic because originally they escaped from aquaculture, and then now they eat all the aquaculture stocks in Florida. And now there's a state level ban in the state of Florida in the US that bans you from, that keeps you from getting those walking catfish. The lionfish is the last on our list, and it's the first saltwater species actually. It's originally from the Indo-Pacific region, and it originally escaped or was released by aquarists in the Atlantic. No one knows if it was intentionally or if it was by accident, but I think getting a saltwater animal into the ocean must be intentionally. So they were released into the Atlantic Ocean in the late 20th century, where they did not have any natural competition, basically, because the lionfish looks beautiful, but it's actually quite poisonous. So other fish cannot naturally eat those. So there's no natural predators in the Atlantic that recognize them as food, and their venomous spikes actually kept them completely safe from other predators. They actually acted as living vacuum cleaners in coral reefs. They ate away all local fry and all smaller fish in those coral reefs, and are a super big threat for biodiversity in all those regions where they were introduced. Therefore, live importation of those lionfish is now completely banned in Florida, for instance, where they live in the Atlantic. And they have strict defensive trade regulations in Cyprus and in the Caribbean, so both in the Mediterranean Sea and also in the Atlantic Ocean, where they were introduced. And it's quite interesting to see that one species from Asia, from Asian oceans, was introduced to two different oceans and completely disrupted the whole ecosystem there, despite them being in completely new ecosystems. And with that, I want to say thank you guys for watching the video, and thanks for all of my channel members who keep supporting me and my work here every month with a small contribution. This is something, the channel membership, that helps me keep the channel running and helps you with exclusive content. There's some members only videos and with early access to my new videos. So if you want to support me and my work here, please consider subscribing as a channel member here with this QR code or in the description of the video below. And if you found this video interesting, I'm sure you would like this video where I talk about the effect of invasive species on our German lakes and rivers, or this video. Thanks for watching.